I'm not nervous at all.
Right.
But I do this all the time.
Yeah.
We are live. Can you see the big red button in the corner?
Sure.
Fantastic. Now the whole world can see you, Katy. Hope there's no pressure.
None whatsoever. Yeah, thanks.
Not like you're worried and anxious about this. Don't need to be. I should have done this beforehand, but it doesn't matter because people are joining. Hello, everybody. If you are here already, fantastic. On the right-hand side, you can see some panels where if you go into comments, you'll see that that's where people, if they comment and ask questions, you'll see that. So put it into comments rather than anything else. Welcome all. If you are here already, fantastic. It's great to have you join myself, Dave, and Katy talk about gambling and gambling support at work. Really insightful conversation ahead. And probably something I'm going to learn a lot from as well, not being in a workplace really, and being able to take a lot away from this conversation in regards to how companies can really look after it. So yeah, I'm going to be sitting back and listening and learning as well as you guys. But if you have any questions and want to ask Dave and Katy anything about what we're going to talk about, then please do get yourself in the comments. And whilst we're waiting to kind of really get into it, just say hello, introduce yourself, tell me where you are, and maybe what you want to take away from this conversation as well. And hopefully we can give you that and make sure we're focused towards that as well. But we are 90 seconds in, so let's get started. Hello, everybody. Again, as I said, really excited to have this conversation around gambling support within the workplace and maybe some of the dangers and some of the things to watch out for and some of the tools that we can be implementing as workplaces, as individuals as well, and managers as well, in how we can support our organizations and teams go through this if and when they need it. I'm joined by two fabulous guests, Dave Quinti, did I get that correct, mate?
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. Yeah. And Katy Wilson, both from Betknowmore. And Dave, I know you do a bit more as well. But we'll get into that shortly in our introductions. But yeah, it's going to be really insightful. What I'll do, I'll get myself out of the way in regards to introductions, and I'm going to throw this over to you guys so that you guys can introduce yourself properly rather than my butchered attempt. If you don't know who I am, my name's Rich. I am a leadership performance coach, executive coach, wellbeing coach, and the founder of two organizations. First one is LP Revolution, which is focused towards performance, teams and leadership, and individuals, making sure that they are performing at their best in each area that they can, through different types of training and support. The second is Employees Health, which is a workplace wellbeing company focused around education, how people can support their well-being in the 4 pillars of well-being, and which is also connected to this LinkedIn Live, the wellbeing chat, is where it all started from. And so, yeah, if you want to know anything about those two different organizations, then just drop me a line. We can have that conversation offline. But as I said, I am joined here today by two awesome people with lots of knowledge around gambling support, and I'm really interested to hear what they have to say. And so I'm going to shut up. And Dave, I'm going to throw it over to you to start with, and say, please introduce yourself. Tell me who you are, where your past, and what you're doing now as well, if possible.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. And it's good to be here today, and thanks to everyone for attending. Yes, my name is Dave Quinti. So I am someone with my own experience of gambling harm. I'm in recovery now for just over 10 years. Currently work as a peer rate coordinator at Betknowmore, supporting other people and volunteers who come forward to support others. I work as a co-leader at GLEN, which is the Gambling Lived Experience Network charity, which is an independent charity applying the voice of lived experience. I work with GambleAware. I've also worked with Reframe, so I'm very much kind of immersed in this space, and very much that was based on me when I came out of my own recovery or my own sort of therapy with Beacon to get support to others out there, because when I went in there, it kind of felt like it was just me, and it wasn't. And when I came out of that sort of clinical support I got, I wanted to help others. Just to give you a bit about my history. So I was kind of gambling on and off for around about 20 years. It got really bad sort of to the late 2000s when obviously phones came in and it was an online thing to do. I started off in bookies, just doing bets on a Saturday afternoon with friends, going out into Manchester because I'm based in Stockport. It'd be a bit of fun. And then eventually I started to do that on my own, on the phone, mainly at home. Started to rack up lots of sort of bad debts, started from £5 bets to 100, going from sports betting to something that I felt I knew something about, up to sort of just doing roulette because I wanted that quick hit and sort of spending lots of money on credit cards when you could do that, taking out loans to pay the credit cards and so on. But eventually then I got into a really bad place where I just couldn't sort of turn back from it, and I had to stop, and then I seek support. But the reason I'm also here today is to talk about the impact it had on me in the workplace, because I used to work at a company and I was there for 10 years as an ops manager in a big environment. And while I was there, I was gambling. I did stop while I was there, and I did get some support. But I wanted to come on today to talk about obviously the impact of what it did to me when I was at that place, in relation to what, not just in relation to financial debt, but what it did to me personally, mentally, socially, all the kind of aspects that it touched on. So that's kind of just a bit about me, if that's all right, Rich. Okay.
Oh, mate, thank you. Great introduction. And I hope, as you can see, there can be lots of useful information shared. And thank you for sharing your story as well, mate. Katy, over to you.
Yeah, hi. Thanks everyone for coming along and listening to this session today. Name's Katy, Operations and Business Development Lead with the gambling support charity Betknowmore UK. I joined the charity not close to 3 years ago now, and I knew absolutely nothing about gambling harms and the impact they could have on people. But over the last 3 years, I've become extremely passionate now, and one of those annoying people that will tell all their friends and family about these little factoids to do with gambling, especially when it comes to, behaviours in the workplace. But also a lot of my friends are parents to young children. So I'm out there saying, like, watch what games they're playing, watch what's happening around them socially, because the impact of gambling starts from such a young age. Within Betknowmore UK, we have some amazing support services, which we can touch a little bit on. We have our peer aid service, which is the, very much lived experience based service, providing one-to-one support to people experiencing gambling harms directly. And there are also group work sessions that they do. And you get through a very structured program with peer aid, which is a fantastic way of people to engage with other people who have experienced this directly. As I say, that lived experience grounding of everything that we do is crucial. We have our Goals community outreach service, originally sort of based in London, where we can go out to meet people in an environment that they're comfortable with, if you like. We can have one-to-one sessions with people in cafes, in parks, somewhere that it's easy for them to sort of like interact on a playing field that's comfortable for them. And we also go out to do community outreach events. So we'll go to lots of different events going on throughout London, have brief interventions with people in that sort of safe environment within their own community. And again, that's a really fantastic sort of support service that we provide. And one of the ones that I'm really passionate about is our New Beginnings service. It's our women-only service, pioneered by one of our amazing experts by experience, who, when she was going through her own experience of gambling harms, kind of felt that the support service for women wasn't really there in the way that she would have been comfortable accessing it. So when she got through to a safe space in her own recovery, she decided, right, we need something at Betknowmore UK that is based really around what women need. So it's a service for women, delivered by women. So that's our New Beginning service. But my role within Betknowmore is primarily focused on our workplace wellbeing program, which is our WorkSafe initiative. And that's where I'm very much out there on the LinkedIn community and going out to other events across the country, really trying to get organisations to place awareness of gambling harms on the health and wellbeing agenda. We'll touch on a little bit more on policies and things like that a little bit later on. But crucially, we find that I think it's like less than 10% of companies in the UK will have a gambling in the workplace policy in place. We find that without that people just aren't coming forward to disclose. So we have so many conversations with people in a business setting, and they'll say, no, there's no problem with gambling in our organisation. It's not an issue for us, so we don't need to invest in any kind of education, awareness raising, and anything like that. And that's the obstacles that we face quite a lot. So a lot of the work that I do is focused on changing that narrative and really getting people to understand that there are serious health and wellbeing and potentially health and safety implications of organisations that aren't taking gambling harms as seriously as they do other forms of addiction, like drug or alcohol, for example.
Yeah, so brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Just because I know what Mike's could be like, I've got a new build going on next to me. Can you hear me, or can you hear the background?
I can hear you okay. There's a little bit of background noise, but not too much.
You're fine. It's a bit in the background now.
Let's just do this quickly. Better? Perfect. Dave, I'd love to go back to your experience, just to create a bit more of a picture for people listening. So you said you've been, obviously, you were gambling for 20 years. And obviously, at a point, you obviously must have got really bad. Can you just kind of paint that picture of what was going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I say 20 years, a lot of it was kind of just occasional gambling for the early years. I would say the last 2-3 years were probably the worst, or even the last 6 months. I want to say worse, what was happening was it wasn't just a thing anymore where it was a bit of fun. It started to become like a job, something I had to do every day. I would wake up, well, if I did sleep, that is, because I would generally not sleep a lot because I'd be worried about chasing losses, losing money, and then having to win that back and how I was going to do that. So a lot of it would be me sort of then trying to work out how to do that. I would be wanting to gamble all day. It became my thing. It wasn't fun. It became exhausting. It became completely consuming. But what happened to me in that time was obviously nobody knew about anything that was going on because I kept it very well hidden. There's a lot of stigma around gambling. There's a lot of stigma around what gambling is, and actually people's perception of that gambling is not as bad as alcohol or drugs, or actually isn't an addiction. It's something that you choose to do, and it's not. It became consuming for me. I couldn't stop. I had to hide bills. I had to hide letters. I had to hide what I was doing from my family, my friends, work colleagues, everybody, because the ultimate was if I tell them what's going to happen to me, I might lose my family, I might lose my job, I could lose everything. And that wasn't an option for me. So I tried to hide it. But obviously with that, you live in a double life. So you're thinking ahead all the time, but like a chess game to some degree. You're thinking all these moves, having to rethink things. But what happened was, so we'll talk about work in a minute, but personally, I didn't want to go out anywhere anymore. I just wanted to stay in and gamble. So when family events came up, I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go to do that. If there was a chance for me to get out and do something, I would do it so I could go off and gamble. I would sometimes take days off work to go and gamble, sit in a car and just gamble all day, pretend I was sick when I wasn't. I didn't want to see friends. I wasn't eating properly anymore. I wasn't exercising. So all those things that you do in normal life would all sort of fall apart around me, because all I wanted to do was gamble. Every minute of the day was a chance to put a bet on to win something. Even to some days going into work and not showering. And that's being honest, because I didn't want to spend 15 minutes in a shower when I could be gambling. So it became everything. And the value of money was lost. So I was gambling large amounts of money on my phone all the time. And that's all I was doing. So everything around me was just, but people, I still tried to put this facade on that everything was okay when it wasn't. Mental health was declining. I just wasn't feeling well. I was feeling depressed. So everything around me was just kind of getting worse. But even towards the end, I still felt I was in control of it. I could come out of it. I could do something, but I couldn't. And as I mentioned, I touched on there, going into work and having to do a day's work in the position I was in, with having no sleep, not eating, worrying, was just unbearable. And I did it. But some days it was just unbearable, and my performance was poor, and everything around work and me just wasn't me anymore. So gambling isn't just a financial thing, or it's fun. It takes everything away from you when you get into that position, where you can't really go back. So, yeah.
I think the thing I heard there was like how all-consuming it is, and not only the impact on, if it's all-consuming, the impact of your work and your output. And actually, can you work whilst it's all-consuming? And as you said, like your performance drops, but also the outside of that as well, like the life and the family and the relationships and your own well-being gets massively impacted as well.
Yeah, everything was, like I said, everything wasn't the same anymore. So you're having to go into work to try and manage teams, because the thing is, I had teams I had to look after, and I had to be present for those teams, and I wasn't present when I was in work, because even then I wanted to gamble on my phone. I wanted to go off to a break or do something so I could check a bet. So, having to attend a meeting or having to facilitate something or present was just unbearable, and I was tired and I was exhausted, and I had to do it. So actually the impact wasn't just on me, it was the people around I work with, their well-being. My employer, my performance levels. I'm worrying about losing my job was the thing when I thought, if I tell someone, I could lose my job, but also I could lose my job anyway because I'm not performing to standards that I've been asked to do. And it was because gambling, that's all I wanted to do, like I said, and I was just tired. Even sometimes walking into the office was just a chore in itself, and I would sometimes turn back and I would not go in. And that was towards the latter days of that. And I would make excuses up for what was happening to me. I would say I was ill, or somebody else was ill, or something was going on and I couldn't be in work. So I'd always try and make excuses so I could be off and gamble. And that's kind of what impacted me.
What was the moment that you decided to make the change?
There was a few things really. One was that I was just in a state with financially. I had loans on top of loans and cards, and I couldn't pay them anymore. I was just feeling completely that low that I just felt I had to tell someone, because it was the alternative was, well, what do I do? I was contemplating suicide at one point. It got that bad, but I didn't want to go ahead with that. And I have talked about this also in previous chats that I've done. But we say about signs of gambling and how to notice signs, not just in the workplace but at home. But my lad, who was 8 at the time, had an inkling something wasn't right with me. Saw me on a roulette wheel on an iPad. I said to him, I wish you'd just stop doing that. And I had no idea that he knew anything. He probably didn't know what I was doing, but he had an inkling something wasn't right. And at that point, I was really close to sort of rock bottom. And that was kind of like the next kind of thing for me. So when that happened and he told me that, I just said, I have to do something. I have to change. I have to stop, because ultimately I can't go on living like this way. I have to do something. And that's when I decided to stop. And it was 2 weeks when I stopped, when I decided to tell my family, my partner, my wife, and so on. But unfortunately, it kind of got out just before that, and we had a rough time. But I did then go and get some clinical support, found some support with Beacon, who helped me. But yeah, it was literally, I think I was just at the rock bottom where I just couldn't continue physically, mentally. I was just exhausted. So I had to do something. But I think that with my lad as well was the turning point as well, to some degree. Yeah,
because that's a really interesting part, right? Especially when it comes to the statistics around financial well-being, right? Especially when it comes to mental health, that for a lot of people, they can't do that. And so it's interesting to see, like, that was, you felt comfortable and brave enough, I guess is probably the right term, to make that change, to reach out, make that change and speak to somebody.
Yeah, I had to. I felt like I had to do something. I knew that it was going to be bad, because obviously I'd kept it this long and I'd racked up this debt and I'd lied so much. The trust was, I knew that potentially I was going to lose everything, my partner, my house. I may lose my job if I tell my boss what's going to happen. But I had to do something, because the alternative wasn't an option anymore. And for me, luckily that didn't happen and we worked through it. But, there's so many things that gambling does. It takes that trust away. It takes that, all those things that you've done in your life as a person. And luckily for me, also in my work at the time, my boss was very understanding in relation to when I told them, even though they had no idea what gambling was about, they were understanding to my situation. So that was a big weight lifted, but it could have gone very much a different way. But even then I thought, well, if that happens, at least I'm doing something. At least I'll get support. At least I can try and recover and then do the right thing. So, but for me at that point, it was just like, I think I'm going to get to a point where they think this is it. It's rock bottom. I have to do something. I have to reach out and do something. And that was it for me, really, at that point.
Yeah, I think, it's nice to hear that once you then had the support. I think that's one of the key parts, right?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. You get support, but it's a very tough road, because obviously everything's broken, everything's fragile, everything. I kept thinking from one day to the next, like there could be a change in. I decided actually I don't want to stay with you. I decided that actually this is not working. So there was always that, but I kept maintaining that I had to do it, because the alternative would be that if I've got a chance now, the alternative is if I do this, I'm going to lose it. So I can't do that anymore. And I had to stick on that road. As hard as that is, because, every day was difficult and there was some days tougher than others. And even in work, it was tough knowing that someone else knew in work, but it was a good thing that someone knew and had my back. And that sort of helped me progress as well. So yeah, support was at that point good for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Katy, I'm going to come over to you. We want to look at the workplace. Thank you, first off, Dave. Actually, I should just say that. Thank you for sharing. I think having that insight and sharing that story just creates that picture and actually understanding of what it's like to go through that. So hopefully the next bit's kind of, when you talk about the tools and the way the managers and teams can look after it, helps us understand that a bit more. I want to look at the workplace and some of the key issues that arise around gambling, and some of the problems the workplace face when it comes to gambling support.
Yeah, I mean, as obviously Dave has touched upon, he's going to work, but then sometimes he's not present, despite the fact that he's there. So he's not present for his team members in his case, where he had a sort of a leadership responsibility. And then the knock-on impact of that, I mean, he's coming to work when he's tired. He's coming to work when potentially his judgment is impaired. His leadership skills aren't what they should be. So he's not supporting his team in the way that he potentially would be normally. If you consider that from a health and safety perspective, potentially, Dave wasn't in that particular kind of role. But if, for example, you're working in a construction organization, for example, and you're operating heavy machinery and you're knackered and you're as I say, your judgment's potentially impaired, the potential for accidents to take place, it's really problematic. And we have heard stories from other people with lived experience of gambling harms, where they're actually gambling whilst they're at work, whilst they're driving their long distance lorry, whilst they're supporting someone through their driving test, for example, is another example that we've had. So, those kind of implications and the risks to the company are strong, but they're things that people aren't aware of. As Dave's already talked about, with gambling being very much a hidden addiction, and you probably won't mind me saying, Dave, but a lot of the people that we speak to with lived experience of gambling harms, they're very good liars about it, because they are. The shame and the stigma that they're feeling, they're not open about it. So when we talk about sort of looking for the signs of gambling harms in people, you won't necessarily know that it's not obvious signs. We talk about a comparison with drink and drugs, for example. There's no physical signs necessarily that point immediately to it being gambling harms. People will come into work, as Dave said, he'd not showered. So it may be a decline in their personal hygiene. It may be a decline in their physical health because they're not eating properly, they're not sleeping properly. So they're tired, they're withdrawn and they're drawn. Not eating or exercising, again, as I say, that impacts on your physical health, but of course your mental health as well. The obvious ones, everyone knows in the middle of a cost of living crisis that financial well-being is such a major impact on everyone's lives. Even without the gambling, if you're struggling with your financial well-being, again, you've got all those signs that it's impacting on your mental health and so on. The problem we've got is, as I say, that they don't obviously say to someone's not going to come into work and say, oh, look at that person, he's disheveled, he's tired, it must be that he's got a gambling issue. And it's just not that obvious. So that's where we always come in and sort of say that having a policy in place is absolutely crucial. Mm-hmm. By having any kind of policy in place, one that's obviously supportive, not punitive, you're creating that environment of psychological safety. Once you create that psychologically safe space, people will be more inclined to come forward and say, look, you've noticed these things around my mental health, my financial well-being. But now that I know that I've got a safe space and I know who to talk to about this is what I can disclose now. It's down to gambling, and what help can I get now as a result of that? So yeah, the impact on the workplace can be all those things that you see with other mental health conditions, other physical health impacts, but it's just being confident enough to ask those questions. Is there an issue around gambling that we need to be aware of, and then know where to signpost people for support?
Can I just add on to that, Katy, if that's all right? You're right. And then you're right. We've become good liars because we have to, because the alternative is the dread that we fear of what will happen. So everything, you're right, we've become amazingly great liars at it, which is not a skill you want. And you're right, the signs to look out for. People say it is an invisible addiction, it's hidden. We hid behind it well. But like you said, just touching a few, I was probably coming to work some days, probably not looking as smart as I did, probably not being as present as I was, probably on my phone too much, being withdrawn when I'm normally more outgoing. So there's loads of different signs that you can see, but not necessarily you would pinpoint, as you said, to gambling. It could also be that person has been drinking quite a lot to actually offset the gambling, to take some anxiety away from that. So you're right. So, and then you come in and you might smell alcohol and think actually it's alcohol, but actually could be combined with a comorbidity. So you're right, a policy, we need something to normalise the conversation. And we'll touch this in a minute, but there was just one thing that happened to me at work when I was working at this other organisation for 10 years, was when someone rang in sick one day, I went in to put in the sickness thing for them. And the first three things that came up were alcohol and drugs, but there was nothing for gambling. And that's what made me start to think, I'll go into it a bit later, but why is there nothing around gambling here? Because obviously myself was a gambler then. So what do we do? And I started to then think about how do we have that conversation, but I don't want to say too much at this point, Richard, but yeah, so what Kate's saying is spot on. Need to normalise it.
Yeah, 100%. But I think it's the same, this awareness, the more we create, the more we talk about it, the more we normalise it, I guess, is probably one of the key parts. A little bit like mental health, a little bit like financial well-being, all those things. The more we create awareness, the more we talk and do these things, the more we do it. One of the things I don't know how to ask this question, so I'm just going to create it as an awareness. And I might be completely wrong, but I can imagine genders are affected slightly differently. And I can imagine because of that, industries are affected slightly differently. But although, as I say that, I go, okay, well, maybe those blue-collar industries are affected in a certain way, as you said, maybe like the health and safety risks versus the white-collar, which maybe is a bit more of a visual thing, and you have to, maybe there's a little bit harder to recognize. And then, as you said, the gender between the women as well. As I said at the beginning, this is new to me. Can you guys share some of this differences, things to keep an eye out for, maybe within those differences? Actually, what's the statistics between? Do you know the statistics between men and females in regards to gambling?
It's a difficult one because where there is some amazing work going on in the gambling support space, research is still comparatively limited when looking at other sort of forms of addiction and so on. Historically, gambling has always been more associated or more prevalent, gambling harms in men. But when we sort of look back to, I can't just blame COVID, the gift that keeps on giving, but it does have a lot to answer for when it comes to more and more women accessing gambling. And I will touch on my pet hate subject, which is gambling advertising. When you look at the way that things like bingo, for example, is advertised very much towards women. Be part of our community, be part of our family, all the while that people were at home isolated from all those connections that they normally have, those social connections. They're at home during the pandemic and there's no kind of escape for them or anything like that. They're seeing these adverts, come and join our community, be part of our network of bingo players and things like that. And all of a sudden, more and more women were accessing gambling. And so slightly different forms potentially, but the impact harms-wise is very much the same. As I say, historically, men still are, I believe that it's still the case, isn't it, Dave, that it is still a higher percentage of men who are gambling and who are experiencing gambling harms, but the gap is definitely decreasing now.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's been the thing. I mean, if you look at someone like me, I'd probably be seen as your typical gambler. Or if you walk into somewhere like GA, you'd expect to see someone like me, middle-aged, sort of white man here, and been through gambling. So, but the women also, you talk about stigma with gambling, it's even worse for women. And that's why we feel that a lot of women don't come forward. And like you said, things like bingo now have been made out to be that it's not. Some people even think now that bingo isn't gambling, or those types of games that you might see. I mean, the advertising, that's another conversation, we won't get into that, but the advertising, as you said, is something like it's fun and it's just okay. And people don't see lottery, bingo as gambling. It's sort of, they'll do it, but the risk is still the same. So a lot of women might be more prone to go do bingo because it's something that's just been maybe even in the family historically. But actually, people who've come forward to get support from us have actually had harm from that as well, and lost lots of amount of money as well. But yeah, there's definitely a difference. But I think even now, with the stigma of even just men coming forward or anyone coming forward of any age or background, it's harder for women as well to come forward because of the stigma that's involved.
Yeah. You always find that with women, it's a massive guilt as well. So it's not just the stigma. Guilt is a key thing as far as my understanding of it. I was chatting to someone the other day and they were saying, when women, for example, they experience a win, for example, their mind will go sometimes to paying, look what we can do with that. We can spend time with the kids, we can go on a holiday, things like that. And the way that they sort of want to use that money is different from men. Their relationship with money generally is different as well. So if the money is being lost on gambling, there is that guilt as well that, if they hadn't lost that money, they could have been doing this with their family. Yeah. It's just a bit of a difference there as well. But I mean, I was talking to someone in an organisation. They work for a manufacturing company, and their workforce is 95% male. So we're going to be doing some work with them, and they want someone that is with lived experience from a male perspective to come forward and have a session with them. But he said he noticed that people in the canteen are there on their phones, they're gambling, and that will lead us to the sort of workplace culture thing. In workplaces, you'll find if it is a higher proportion of male workforce, then they are going to be talking about sports betting. It's going to be coming up to the new start of the football season. That's all they're going to be talking about. And it's going to be potentially betting on individual games. Fantasy leagues will be kicking off in different organisations, and that there's usually a lot of betting that goes on around that as well. So that's one of the sort of gendered differences, if you like, that is quite a sort of common one. Obviously, no one wants to stereotype, but it is a difference in the sort of forms of betting that people will be involved in. It can be gendered.
just a quick one as well. When I actually came out of work and told people about what was happening, well, my boss initially, but people found out through an article. A woman did come forward and speak to me, who I work with, who was playing bingo. But what she said was she should go to bingo halls or she'd play bingo online, but then there'd be other games attached to that. It wasn't just bingo anymore. So it became like slots or other things around, because bingo is a term used for not just, you know, the dabber on the little fingers, we used to call it, but for all these other games involved now, and they would get widely into that, you know, and then obviously experience harm. So yeah, it does happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't talk about signs and things to watch out for. That difference between, or what you're looking out for between the two different white collar, blue collar, and then the women as well. Because I think each three areas will have different signs. I think I'm not hopefully, as I said, I don't know. So yeah, are there different signs you need to be watching out for within blue collar, white collar, and then maybe different genders as well?
I mean, I think from the workplace I was in, obviously I was in a workplace of probably over 1,000 people. And when I sort of realized my own problems and I started to notice signs more within people who I felt may be gambling, because it happened to myself. So, you know, all of a sudden I'd noticed that certain people were laid back from breaks all the time, or would make excuses to do various things. Or if there was someone wanted to get involved in a project or a brew run or something, they would always go and do that, and they'd always then be on the phone. So I started to think, are they then gambling? You know, and that would happen quite a lot. I wouldn't say necessarily where I was, there was a massive difference between men and women, but I think in the culture I was in, the place I was in, when anything came about, because I was in this organisation where big events would, like the Premier League would start, and we'd have lots of sweepstakes going on, we'd have cards. It was always like a male culture thing to get involved, whereas more women would kind of step back or not feel like, or they might just do maybe a bingo card or guess the name rather than like a sweepstake, or go to the bookies and put an actual bet on. So there was differences there. But I think, you know, generally I could see the signs in people I felt that were probably gambling. And also, you know, I said, you know, changing behavior, just how they were, performance just being not where it needs to be anymore. But again, by having a conversation then in a one-to-one, no one would come up to me and say, yeah, it's because I'm gambling. And maybe they were, you know, and that's why we got back into that whole thing about having that conversation at work and that policy and that space to be okay to talk to people if that happens. So
I guess you said there, like, yeah, it probably shows up in different ways to different people. I guess what come to life for me there was, is it just because there is, as you said, there's not much difference between if it's alcohol, if it's mental health, if it's gambling in regards to like some of the signs. So is it just, if we look at it from somebody being able to recognize it and go, hey, Dave, how are you? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think there's something up, because there's other things as well. There's things that I know. So sometimes people will come into work and they won't have money anymore, or they won't be able to. They've just been paid, and all of a sudden they're asking friends could they borrow a fiver, or could they get them a brew? You know, and that was the bit like, well, why is that happening at this point? You know, and sometimes that was very unusual for certain types of people. But yeah, you know, if I felt there was something wrong, I'd want to have the confidence to be able to say to them, are you okay? What's going on? You know, but would they tell me about gambling? Probably not. Would they be more prone to tell me about alcohol? Maybe. But even if it was like, yeah, so I'm drinking too much, I'm like, right, okay, talk to me about that. And then it might go into something else because I'm gambling or because I'm losing money by this. This is why I then medicate with alcohol. But, you know, in my whole sort of 10 years there, I had probably one conversation, like I said, with that one person about gambling. Nobody came forward at any point to tell me. And I think that's because of the culture we were in, where, you know, it wasn't seen as something that is okay to speak about in a sense, or I'd rather, you know, dress it up as something else, because if I say it's gambling, I'm going to be judged and I'm going to be vilified and I'm going to lose everything. So I think that's the problem. And I think we touched on this, but it goes back to, we need to be there from the start. So even when people are coming into the job in an induction process, they're told about things happening in the workplace, whether it's drugs, alcohol, and what things you can do. Gambling should be there as well. You know, we should be talking about, if you see these signs, it could be someone that's gambling, and it's all right to maybe ask that person, are they okay? But, you know, the problem is, because it's not in place, people don't talk about it. I think that's the issue at the moment.
Yeah, very much so. And with other addictive behaviors, so for example, drugs and alcohol, the body can reach a physical saturation point. So it can become more obvious in that regard. Whereas with gambling, your body doesn't necessarily reach that physical saturation point. You need three things to gamble. You need access to gambling, you need time, and you need resources. So if you can get all of those three, then you can continue to gamble. And when people run out of money, they will find that they will tap into other resources that can obviously lead them down very challenging paths. We hear a lot of stories that are published in the press about people who have stolen from their employers to fund their gambling. And so if you're working for an organization where, for example, people have access to the company finances, are you monitoring it carefully enough? Are you aware that people could be taking that money to use to fund their gambling harms? So there are things that you can definitely look out for, and you can do to protect your organization as well, because we speak to a lot of people where they take well-being seriously within the workplace, but it's not the be-all and end-all for them. They are commercially driven and they're focused on the bottom line. Or if it's in construction, for example, health and safety is absolutely crucial to them. So what we want to try and do is get people to sort of recognise that actually with these different things, the different behaviours that are associated with gambling harms, you can have all these different implications as well. And that's one of the things that we talked to you about. But you can't reach that same sort of saturation point with gambling harms as you can necessarily with the physical substance abuse, if you like. So that's another thing to look out for, is whether there's, as Dave said, alarm bells with someone asking for money after can we have a pay advance, or they're not going to the social events that they used to. Is it because they can't afford to anymore? If you're doing lots of things do happen in workplaces which can potentially be triggers for people who are experiencing gambling harms. Do you go to the casino for a work event? You're going to have a social on the calendar, and you're going to go to the casino, you're going to go to the races, you're going to go to bingo. If you're doing all these things, they could be triggers. And whilst we're not sort of anti-gambling and saying you shouldn't be doing these things, you need to be aware that these are potential triggers. So are you offering alternatives? Are you saying to people these activities aren't compulsory? Are you doing things that are more inclusive? Just as you would necessarily do when you're aware about alcohol in the workplace, for example, you wouldn't necessarily have everyone going to the pub at lunchtime. So again, it's looking for what you could do as an alternative to these things, so you're not putting people at risk individually from their own well-being, but also reputationally for your business potentially.
It's really interesting. Because I guess I've written down here safe gambling, but with that, with the social side of work, and you said the races, bingo, casinos, how do companies still do it, but in a safe way?
I mean, that's what to say first. I think it shows the kind of lack of awareness of gambling harm, because as Katy touched on, I remember we had dues where one would be alcohol, and then might be another separate night where there's a non-alcoholic night where people go and have food but don't necessarily drink. But we did have then a work event one year where it was a James Bond themed casino night, and that was the one event only. So everybody went to that, but there was roulette tables, there was real money being played, and there was no conversations around or any thoughts of actually this could be harming someone, or someone might be having a problem, so this might be the worst place for them to be. But actually, because they're in a high position, they feel they need to be there because that's what the focus of the company is. Your high position, you need to be there for the team. Well, actually, I'm suffering from gambling, but no one's asked me about that. It's just seen as it's okay. So, and like I said, I'm not anti-gambling. It's the small percentage who suffer gambling harm. It's about, for me, the awareness and the prevention and making sure people know exactly what is out there and what support they can do if there's a problem. But that was never really asked, and it wasn't a kind of an option. It was like, this is what we're doing and that's it. And again, that's not for everybody. So if people don't turn up then it's saying, oh, well, they're a bit antisocial, they don't want to come. But it could be because they have a problem. But no one's actually explored that or even asked that question. So I think that happens quite a lot. And like I said, in the company I was in, it happened literally every event, big event, it'd be golf, it'd be football. There'd be this massive thing around getting dressed up, doing cards, sweepstakes, all that stuff was coming in. And that's exciting to be around when there's a lot of people. If you're someone who's struggling, that's the worst place to be. So, so someone's ringing in sick when there's a new event starting, that could be the reason. But if you're not going to ask that question or maybe have things in place for them to know that there's the support if you need it, they're going to struggle to come forward and do that.
Yes, as Dave said, just when his previous employer was offering alternatives for drink-based activities, do the same for gambling-based activities. Anonymous employee surveys can be helpful. We're planning on doing this for a workplace event. Is this something that you would attend? Yes or no? You don't have to even give any reasons then, but you can then gauge the temperature as to whether that's the appropriate event for your organisation at that time.
Yeah, and I feel like that question also, if you ask it the right way and ask the follow-on questions, can give you a chance to find out if people are struggling as well. Maybe it might be anonymously, it might be that kind of, what do you think of this event? This is what we're planning to do. Do you like it? Can you see a problem with it? Is there, etc., etc.? It might give just a bit more chance for feedback and people a chance to open up.
Yeah. I mean, these end of January this year, NICE guidelines were published around gambling harms, which is really crucial step forward for us and in this space in general. And obviously, NICE guidelines are focused on healthcare professionals, but they are basically coming out there and saying now that with gambling being very much a public health issue now, it is important that whenever someone comes to the GP, for example, or any other sort of healthcare worker, it's exhibiting some of the signs that could potentially be associated with gambling harms. They are now required to ask, so to screen for gambling harms. And the reason why that's an important step forward is because we think that now, what happens in the healthcare sector, eventually will trickle down to occupational health, well-being at work, sort of mental health champions and so on. So if, as a country now, we're being encouraged to ask those questions from a healthcare perspective, eventually that will come down to the workplace. So yes, it will become the right time where employers should ask those questions. And Dave mentioned it there. Prevention is, a fundamental aspect of the work that we do. Gambling is associated with being on a continuum. You can have those people that are gambling socially, gambling at the fun level. It moves forward to those people that are gambling at risk levels. And then it goes obviously to the other extreme where people are gambling at really harmful levels. If we can capture, educate and raise awareness when people are gambling socially, letting them know that the minute they start to feel that it's having an impact on their relationships, it's having an impact on their performance at work, it's having an impact on their bank balance, there is support that they can get even at that level of gambling. You don't have to wait until it hits that really extreme level before you can access support. But that means that, we've got to get that awareness raising out there first. So with these sort of impacts like the NICE guidelines coming in, workplaces becoming more aware, hopefully we'll start to see that where we're doing much more in the prevention space through that awareness raising and educating that when you're doing these activities, if you're going to do something like a sweepstake at work, make sure that your wellbeing page is a signposting towards support for gambling, just in case someone needs it.
Yeah, I mean, in any workplace, you always do like courses online, you do e-learnings, or you have someone come and you'll speak about a certain subject at work. So why not have that in the workplace? If there's someone who's got lived experience in the workplace who wants to be a wellbeing ambassador and talk about their own experience to say that actually this happens, it's normal, or if there's an e-learn that you can complete that gives you indications of when gambling might be getting bad, or that actually this is to help. Because I was very lucky that my boss was quite understanding, but she had no idea about where to signpost me, what to do. I'd already seek support, but there was nothing in there about where I can go, what support I can get, is it available now? So even then, it's nice to have that, but then where do I go then? And that needs to be in there. Just like I said, when I was going through the reasons for someone being off, alcohol, drugs, gambling needs to be in there because it's just as bad, and it will just do the same things to people, even though you can't maybe see them. It will still have that impact. So the more we talk about it at the outset, the more we talk, make it normal that this happens, people will then come forward and not feel judged or, stigmatized.
I think planting the seed is very key as well. With the shame, the stigma, and say with the guilt as well that can be experienced with people who are struggling with gambling harms, they may not be receptive to having that conversation in the first instance. You may get that barrier, no, this is, I don't have a problem, and so on. That is very common, and it's common with a lot of mental health issues and other forms of addiction, that immediate sort of obstacle. But once you've planted the seed, they know that you're someone that they can then talk to about it. So when the time is right for that person, they may well then come forward when the time is right for them. But unless you have shown that awareness, unless you've got the policy in place that creates that psychological safety, then you're not ever going to be able to reach that point where someone's going to be willing to disclose to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much insights and so many kind of valuable bits. But what I'm going to do, is there anything else you guys want to cover quickly before I ask my final couple of questions?
I'll touch very briefly on some research that was published recently by Bupa. They talked about the fact that it's 57% of employees that they surveyed admit to having struggled with some form of addiction. So 57%, that is more than half of the workforce. Of that 57%, 15% of employees were turning to alcohol, 14% to gambling. So that's a substantial proportion of people who are turning to gambling. They're turning to addictive behaviours to cope with workplace stress, workplace pressure, workplace culture, but potentially as well that they're the sort of signs. Them being stressed in the workplace can be the sort of how their gambling harms is sort of impacting them. So it's just being aware that there is more and more awareness out there now, and with that research from Bupa, I think it's really important to see that gambling is being recognised now as something that is as problematic for people as alcohol now, and that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
I just wanted to say quickly, I mean, people sometimes go back to gambling or they realise because of trauma, a traumatic event or something that comes up all of a sudden, people want escapism. So that will happen. So I think what needs to be done is, we need to, and it's hard to have a conversation with someone who you think might be gambling, or even to ask them that question. It's not an easy thing to do because you don't know what stage they're going to be at. They might be the thinking they might have a problem, or they might be way into it like I was. So it's really hard. So I think there needs to be training from the outset about how to handle conversations, to actually know, the different scenarios that could happen, what's boys out there that if someone wanted to speak to you that they could do, and to have those connections in Word that you could go to and speak about it and feel it's a safe place to do it. But it's not an easy thing to do because ultimately most people would rather not have the conversation because they're worried of what the impacts could have. But training, awareness, like Katy talks about the statistics out there about people going through this, that needs to be told to people because it's it's happening, and it's been happening for years, not just now. It's happening just as long as anything else. So people need to be aware of that.
Yeah, completely agree. Thank you for sharing. Look, I want to finish on this last question for both of you, and it's the same question, but I presume you guys might have different views on this, maybe from like the lived experience and kind of how to help somebody in that moment, as well as like the workplace. So. My question is, what's your top 3 tips to help help gambling support or help people through this challenging time or that challenging time? It's a terrible question, phrasing. I didn't think about it before I asked it, but you know what I mean.
That's fine.
I'll let you go first on that one, Dave.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I need to do that. Top 3 tips I would say is firstly have an open mind and understanding that this could be happening around you, because it's probably happening more than you think. Again, we hide it very well because we have to. We're scared about what would happen if people find out. 2 is that if you think there's maybe an issue or a problem with someone that you are working with in a family, if you don't feel comfortable yourself, speak to someone who you might be able to get help from and find out what support they could get. And thirdly, I suppose, be just aware of your own situation. And if you're going through anything yourself, do something about it quickly. If you think there's a change in what you're doing, if all of a sudden you feel like you've been pressured into doing things in relation to, to work activities that involve gambling and you're not comfortable, then just be honest about that and don't be worried about it. So I suppose those are 3 things I could think of there.
Can I just jump in quickly and just ask, can you give me your top 5 places to go as a signpost?
Betknowmore.
Betknowmore is one.
Well, I mean, there's the National Gambling Helpline. There's Samaritan. There's Betknowmore. I mean, there's so many organisations I could talk about. I feel like if I don't mention one, then I'm doing a disservice. But
the thing is that we're all part of the National Gambling Support Network. There is a network of charities across the UK that can provide support should you need it. Mm-hmm. When people come to Betknowmore UK, you can refer yourself online. A very, very quick and simple form to fill in. And what we have crucially now, because we're part of the NGSN, we have a triage service in place, which means that we will talk to you very, very quickly. You won't wait around for a long time for this triage process to get started. You can come to us, tell us what, the extent of the harms that you're experiencing, and we can say to you, right, absolutely, Betknowmore is a great service for you. We can support you through new beginnings. We can support you through peer aid. Alternatively, we may say, actually, we're not the right service for you right now. You need something stronger than what we can provide in terms of peer support. So you might need residential rehabilitation, and we can signpost you towards that. So basically, any sort of service that you come to, or any sort of member of the NGSN, you can come to any of those, and they should be able to direct you to the right place. But if any doubt, the National Gambling Support Lines are great, and National Gambling Helpline is one place to start.
As well, Katy, you really covered that really well. But just quickly as well, one thing we've kind of not covered on, which again could be happening in the workplace, is affected others. So if we don't just offer service for people who have gambling harm, we offer them for people, loved ones, family members who are actually suffering from people who are gambling. I would love to have the service for my wife back then that she could have used, to understand maybe what was happening with me or why that happened, and stop feeling guilty yourself when it was nothing to do with her. So we do, we have services for affected others, but you could be someone in a workplace who's affected by gambling and be seeing all these events happening around you and be really distraught by that. So, affected others as well. It's a term that we use, maybe not the right, but it's a term that we use, can come forward as well, and it happens a lot. So I just want to mention that as well.
Yeah, good point.
Get over to you. Your top 3 tips.
Non-judgmental empathy. They're the key sort of skills that you should have when you're having any conversation with someone that experiences any form of sort of anything that's impacting their health and well-being. Do your homework. If you're going to be putting yourself in the position as someone that's approachable when it comes to discussing gambling harms, make sure that you know your stuff. You know where to signpost people to. We do not expect anybody in the workplace to be an expert in all things relating to mental health and wellbeing, and gambling is a topic that we don't expect people to be experts in, but know where to signpost for support, like the sort of points that we've mentioned already. And again, I think it's a general point for me with any conversation that you might want to have is don't put yourself forward to have a conversation with someone unless you're in the right frame of mind too. If you've got other stuff going on in your world and you're not actually in a strong space to have a conversation, maybe point them in the direction of somebody else to talk to. Don't turn them away, just point them to someone else. When you have conversations around gambling harms, as Dave said, they can be really challenging conversations to have. So you've got to consider your own well-being as well. So that's probably my 3 on that one.
Brilliant, thank you. You guys are superstars. I really appreciate your time and your insights. And thank you for joining me and sharing all of that for the people listening.
Really appreciate your time as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me come in, and thanks, Rich. Yeah.
We're good. And look, as you guys know, this will be recorded, chucked onto YouTube and Spotify, so we can get that shared. Finally, just say thanks on that. Next week, I have Sarah Nightingale, who is player care manager at Cardiff City, but has got a lot of experience from the world of sport. And we're going to talk about putting the person first in regards to performance and the importance of that. So if you're listening here, obviously you want to learn more about that, keep an eye out on my LinkedIn. Connect with both of these superstars on LinkedIn because they're always sharing knowledge and insights. And if you have any questions, reach out to both of them. I feel sure they will both be there as a listening, helpful hand. But yeah, appreciate you all. Thank you. Have a lovely week. Enjoy the heat and the sunshine. Make sure you have lots of water and a fan next to you, which is not destroying the podcast. But yeah, cheers, guys. Stay where you are. Everybody else, see you all.